Guys, welcome back to another Wicked Wednesdays. Today I have another tutorial in store for you guys. I have had a couple of requests since my horned demon tutorial come out to show you guys how to actually make the horns. So in today's tutorial, that is what I will be showing you how to do. So if you'd like to see how that's done, keep watching. So for today's tutorial, you will need a board of some kind or just a flat workbench that you can cast and like sculpt on, just so you don't put a mess everywhere. I like to have mine just on a transferable board so I can move it to and from the areas that I am using it. You will also want some clay. I have sulfur-free clay. You do not need this if you are casting in plaster, but if you are going to cast in silicone, you do need a clay that does not have any sulfur in it, because otherwise it reacts with the silicone and does not allow it to set correctly. And I learned that the hard way with my first casting of silicone. It didn't set on the outside and the inside where I had cast it, which was really disappointing, but it did still work, just not as well as I had hoped it would have. And you will also need just a set of clay sculpting tools. I just got these from a $2 store. They don't need to be anything fancy. And of course, as I say in every other video, you will want some Vaseline just to help you smooth out the actual product and just to put it on as a releasing agent when you do put whatever it is that you're putting over the top, like the plaster and the silicone. And of course, if you are wanting to make this into a prosthetic, you will need, as I mentioned before, plaster or silicone. If you are going to use plaster, I just get plaster of Paris. It is usually around $5 from just a $5 store or an arts and crafts store, a $2 store or an arts and crafts store. Pretty easy to come by, it's not that hard to find. Or if you're wanting to create more of like a flat mold or something like that, you can use silicone. It is fairly pricey compared to the plaster, of course. I do have some flat seal 73 and 15, which I believe it was about $50 for a kilo at Scotty's Makeup, which you can see the price difference between the silicone and the plaster. They both have their qualities, but I have, ever since I used silicone, absolutely loved it. It makes it so much easier just to have a nice finish when you're using the gelatin. I haven't actually made a silicone prosthetic yet, just the actual molds that it's made out of. I have used the silicone for, which I have noticed a massive difference. You just get a much nicer finish on the whole product than you do if it was in plaster. But anyway, I will stop talking and I'll show you how to do it. Anyway guys, let's get started. Okay, so this is one of the casts from my horn mold. This is just a rough one. The tip did not quite come out, but it's gelatin, so I can just reheat it and mold it again. But I just thought for the purpose of this video, I would just give you a rough idea of the shape that I'm going for. So with it, you do want to have a little bit of a curve to it. I just make like 2 casts of the one mold, so I just have 2 of the exact same. I didn't mold 2 separate horns just because I figured they can be used both ways. So as long as you have the curve going roughly just straight back, you can of course then make it however you want. I also have just a really, I'll move it a bit closer for you. You can see just a real kind of maybe about 2mm thick edge of skin going around the edge of the horn where it is protruding out of the skin. This is just quite a dodgy cast of it. I just quickly whipped it up before for you guys. So you will get the gist of what it's meant to look like as I go along. But just remember to always, if you are unsure, just look at yourself in a mirror and hold up the actual sculpt that you are making before you fully stick it down to this up against your head, just so you have a really kind of rough idea of how big and how far it is protruding out of your head. And another thing, if you are making casts, especially in plaster, silicone is a little bit more pliable and you can kind of bend the mold a little bit to get it out. With plaster, you can't have too much of a hook in it, like you could not have a bend like that because there is no physical way of getting the gelatin prosthetic out of there as it is a hook, and it will just like pull and get stuck in there and your whole cast and mold and sculpt will be ruined. So just keep that in mind, that you can have bends, but just make sure that they are not too severe or too sharp, or there is a hook in it, because it will not come out of the mold. Anyway, let's get started. I'm just going to take a chunk of my clay, which it is really quite firm. That is me putting like all my pressure into it. So you do need to play around with it a little bit before it does ease up. So I just use a scrapey tool like this and just, oh god, I'm dropping it. Just scrape little bits and pieces off it until I have enough. So now that I have enough to get me started, you just want to play around with it for a little bit, just molding it and mixing it until it is pliable enough and easy enough to mold and sculpt. Okay, so once that it is pliable enough to start molding, you just want to try and get the shape of the horn. Of course that varies from horn to horn, but to get the horn shape that I wanted, it was reasonably thin. And as I always say guys, it is much easier to do things if you do have a reference picture. I made this one up one night. I didn't have a picture to go with it, sorry, so I cannot link that for you guys, but it's kind of making a cone. You start with a cone, so taper it off to one end. And as you can tell already, we do not need the whole length of this, so I am just cutting a chunk off and set that aside because you will need it later for the skin. And if rolling isn't working for you very well, you can of course just pinch the end and slowly work it around just to taper the end off. So when you're reasonably happy with the shape, you can of course at this stage put it on your head to see like how far out it sticks out. So then you could of course even leave it at this stage and just have a straight out horn. However, I wanted one that did curl up, so I am just gonna gently kind of bend one edge back, trying to not completely ruin the shape of the cone. So now that I've got just a slight curve to it, I'm just going to go back in and out the edges. And now that I think I am happy with it, I'm just going to push it down onto the board so it doesn't move. And now with this bit here, I'm just going to flatten that out. If you do have a rolling pin, of course this is going to be about 50 times easier. But I do not, so I'm just going to work it with my hands. Now for this bit, you don't want to make it too thin, as the horn would be going through several layers of skin and probably a little bit of kind of fatty tissue or muscle or whatever is on your forehead. And you just want to probably nearly cut that in half because you do not need it that long. Okay, so now you're just going to want to place, make that a little bit thinner. Place it just around the edge, start the base of the skin. Smooth that out a little bit. So now you just want to flatten out a bit of clay and cut some ridges into it just to add the effect of torn skin. You then just want to place it around the base of the horn just to make sure that it looks correct and will fit. Once you've done that, just flatten it out and stick it to the edge of the horn and complete this until the horn is completely covered. Once that was done, I cleaned up the edges a little bit, but I still thought it was a little too high, so I trimmed off a little bit of the base and stuck it back down to the board and smoothed out the edges, adding in a little bit of clay to the areas that I thought needed a little bit more. So once I was happy with how the horn looked, I just grabbed a plastic bag and folded it up about 3 times and drew in some of the grooves on the horn. I then went in and added some grooves into the actual skin of the horn just to make it look like the skin has torn as the horn has gone through it. I then went in with my stipple sponge and just added some skin texture to it. Then to prep the sculpt for casting, I just went in and added some Vaseline around the whole thing just to make sure that it can release well once it is fully cast. Then with just a regular plastic cup, I cut the top off it and stuck it around the edge of the sculpt just to create a barrier for which I can pour the plaster into once I'm ready to cast it. So there you go guys, that is the finished sculpt. If you'd like to see how to cast it in plaster, I will leave a link here for my how to sculpt video. I just thought instead of showing you again, I might as well just link the video so you guys can check it out for yourself. But I hope you enjoyed this video guys. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and don't forget to leave any other suggestions for tutorials that you'd like to see me do in the comment section below. And I'll say, oh my god, I can't even. And I'll say, and I'll see you next week. Bye!